Welcome to the Emerging History channel. Be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out more videos like this one. Chaos erupts in Seville on July 21, 1936, as the Spanish Civil War tears the city apart. In the sweltering heat, the streets become a battleground where ideological divides explode into violence, marking the bloody start of a 3-year national nightmare. A relic of naval innovation floats on the James River. In 1865, the USS Casco, a Civil War-era torpedo boat, represents the experimental and dangerous evolution of ironclad warfare that changed naval combat forever. The scale of the narcotics trade is laid bare in this 1850 image from Patna, India. Workers stack thousands of opium balls for the British East India Company, visual proof of the state-sponsored drug empire that fueled colonial wealth and devastating wars. Life persists under the swastika in Nazi-occupied Kharkov, 1942. A storefront stands as a silent witness to the daily indignities of occupation, where ordinary citizens tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy while the shadow of the Holocaust loomed over Eastern Europe. The fight for equality takes center stage at the Women's Exhibition of 1909 in London. Suffragettes stand proudly at their booth, using education and visibility to demand the vote, chipping away at the rigid patriarchal structures of Edwardian society. Resilience takes human form in Shigeki Tanaka, who crosses the finish line to win the 1951 Boston Marathon, a survivor of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. Just 6 years earlier, his victory symbolized Japan's slow, painful return to the international stage. Horror descends upon the Basque Country in April 1937 as survivors pick through the rubble of Guernica. This aerial bombardment by the Luftwaffe shocked the world, targeting civilians in a way that foreshadowed the total destruction of the coming World War. Education crosses borders in 1908 as Swiss teacher Gustavo Michaud poses with his students in San Jose at the Lyceum of Costa Rica. This portrait captures the globalization of knowledge and the formative years of a generation that would shape Central America. The Cold War freezes freedom in Prague. August 1968 AT-55 tank rolls through the streets during Operation Danube, crushing the Prague Spring reforms and reminding the world that the Soviet grip on Eastern Europe would be maintained by force, not diplomacy. East Germany flexes its military muscle on Karl Marx Boulevard in 1979. Tanks rumble past for the 30th anniversary of the GDR, a show of strength. Designed to mask the economic stagnation and political dissent bubbling beneath the surface of the communist state. Tear gas clouds the air at Jeojido POW camp in 1953, where the Korean War's bitterness extends to the prison yards. Anti-communist prisoners resist repatriation, turning the camp into a violent microcosm of the ideological struggle dividing the peninsula. Silence speaks volumes in Mexico City, 1968. Tommy Smith and John Carlos raise gloved fists on the Olympic podium, a defiant Black Power salute that shocked the world and brought the American civil rights struggle to the global stage. The Addams Family cast gathers in 1964, bringing their macabre humor to life. This photo captures the kooky, spooky charm that made the show a cult classic, subverting the wholesome image of the AOC, a typical American TV family. Anxiety fills the room as the Armstrong family watches Apollo 11 blast off in 1969. While the world saw a technological marvel, Neil Armstrong's wife and children saw a husband and father strapped to a rocket, unsure if he would ever return. Beatlemania officially invades America on February 7, 1964. The Fab Four arrive in New York, greeted by screaming fans and flashing cameras, marking the beginning of the British invasion that would permanently revolutionize pop culture and music history. Blackface minstrelsy. A deeply uncomfortable part of American entertainment history is captured in this 1910 photo from Belvidere, Ohio. It serves as a stark reminder of the normalized racism that permeated small-town culture in the early 20th century. Rage ignites Dublin in 1972 as the British embassy burns following the Bloody Sunday massacre where British paratroopers killed unarmed civilians. This arson was a visceral outpouring of grief and anger that intensified the troubles in Northern Ireland. Innovation meets absurdity with the Davis gun in 1910. This recoil-less rifle fired a shell forward and a counterweight backward simultaneously, a bizarre and dangerous attempt to arm fragile early aircraft against submarines without shaking the plane apart. The Iron Duke, Arthur Wellesley, sits for a rare photograph in the 1840s. The man who defeated Napoleon at Waterloo is captured in his twilight years, his stern gaze reflecting a lifetime of military discipline and statesmanship. Even at the edge of the world, sport survives in the 1910s. The crew of the Endurance plays football on the Antarctic ice, a brief moment of joy and camaraderie before their ship was crushed, beginning one of history's greatest survival stories. Poverty and pride coexist in this portrait of the Faust family in East Tennessee circa 1910. Standing barefoot on their porch, they offer a glimpse into the rugged, hardscrabble life of Appalachia before modernization swept through the mountains. The Louvre sits strangely empty in 1918, its masterpieces evacuated to safety. The Grand Gallery, usually filled with art lovers, stands bare, a haunting reminder of how the threat of German shelling forced Paris to hide its cultural soul. Democracy is in session in Topeka. 1905, the Kansas Senate gathers in the Capitol, a room filled with mustaches and three-piece suits, debating the laws of a state that was rapidly transitioning from the frontier era to the modern age. Rock and roll meets the Oval Office in December 1970. Elvis Presley shakes hands with Richard Nixon in a surreal clash of cultures, offering his services as an undercover federal agent in the War on Drugs, a bizarre chapter in presidential history. A majestic shipwreck becomes an accidental landmark in Oxnard, California, 1970. The luxury liner La Jeunelle lies grounded on the beach, drawing curious crowds before the ocean's relentless power eventually forced authorities to dismantle the once glamorous vessel. Far from the Eastern Front, Russian soldiers arrive in Marseille. In 1916, the Russian Expeditionary Force was sent to aid France, a lesser-known chapter of World War I that highlights the desperate global shuffling of troops to break the stalemate. Voices unite for freedom in the Baltic States, 1989. This image from the Singing Revolution captures the peaceful mass protests where Estonians, Latvians, and Lithuanians used folk songs as weapons to reclaim their independence from the collapsing Soviet Union. Before she stood in New York Harbor, Lady Liberty rose over Paris in 1884. Scaffolding surrounds the copper giant in France, revealing the massive engineering effort required to create the gift that would become the ultimate symbol of the American dream. The future calls in 1968 as Toshiba tests its Model 500 Viewphone in Tokyo. This clunky retro-futuristic device was decades ahead of its time, foreshadowing the video calls that would eventually become a daily reality for the entire world. A dream of Leonardo da Vinci comes to life in 1961 as Attila Hulagu attempts to walk on water using oversized float shoes. The Turkish inventor balances on the Bosphorus, a quirky intersection of ambition engineering and sheer eccentricity. The symbol of hate falls in 1945. U.S. troops blow up the massive swastika overlooking the Nuremberg parade grounds, a cinematic and symbolic destruction of the regime that had staged its most grandiose propaganda spectacles in that very spot. Naval firepower roars in 1928 as the USS Lexington fires her 8-inch guns. This early aircraft carrier was a hybrid beast, still clinging to heavy artillery, before naval doctrine fully embraced the realization that planes, not guns, would rule the seas. The future is transparent at the 1939 New York World's Fair. The glass car, a Pontiac with a plexiglass body, stuns visitors by revealing the internal mechanics of the automobile, symbolizing the era's obsession with progress and new materials. The brutal reality of the Vietnam War is captured in 1966. The body of a fallen American paratrooper is hoisted into a helicopter near the Cambodian border, a somber moment of extraction in a conflict defined by jungle warfare and high casualties. Defiance is subtle but sharp. In 1968, the crew of the captured USS Pueblo secretly flashes the finger to North Korean cameras, telling their captors it was a Hawaiian good luck sign to ruin the propaganda value of the photos. California history stands tall in 1870 with Peter Storm and his original bear flag. This rough-hewn banner created during the 1846 revolt against Mexican rule remains the defiant emblem of the state, symbolizing its rebellious and independent origins. Humanity sees the hidden face of the moon for the first time in 1959, taken by the Soviet probe Luna 3. This grainy, low-resolution image was a monumental scientific triumph, revealing the cratered terrain that had been turned away from Earth for billions of years. Civilian courage gathers at Ramsgate. In 1937, these small pleasure boats would soon become the little ships of Dunkirk, called upon in 1940 to cross the Channel and rescue the stranded British Army in one of the war's most miraculous evacuations. A lonely cross marks the cost of liberation at Arnhem in 1945. The grave of an unknown British airborne soldier stands amidst the debris, a quiet, a testament to the fierce and tragic fighting of Operation Market Garden just months before the war ended. Rooftop vigilance defines the 1992 LA riots. Two Korean men stand armed to defend their grocery store, an iconic image that highlighted the breakdown of law and order and the fierce determination of business owners to protect their livelihoods when the police vanished. The world changes in a microsecond. On August 9, 1945, this rare photograph captures the mushroom cloud rising over Nagasaki, a terrifying pillar of smoke and dust that signaled the end of World War II and the dawn of the nuclear age. Bravery or madness? Captain Jack Bonita, the one-armed lion tamer, poses with his pride in the early 1900s, having already lost a limb to his trade. His continued performance speaks to the dangerous allure of the circus and the grit of turn-of-the-century entertainers. New York is recreated on a soundstage in 1984 for Ghostbusters. This behind-the-scenes view reveals the movie magic and practical effects required to bring the Marshmallow Man's rampage to life before the age of digital dominance. Art endures amidst the apocalypse. In Dresden, 1945, painter Theodor Rosenhauer sits calmly in the rubble, capturing the ruins of the Japanese palace on canvas, proving that the drive to create beauty survives even when the world has been destroyed. The grim end of addiction arrives in Beijing, 1937. 3 men face execution because their rehabilitation failed a brutal enforcement of anti-opium laws that highlights the desperate and often lethal measures taken to curb the drug crisis in early 20th century China. In the dusty aftermath of the Falaise pocket childhood, curiosity meets the machinery of war. 3 young French boys inspect a knocked-out Panther tank, a silent steel beast that once dominated their countryside, now rendered harmless in the summer of 1944. A rare glimpse into the pre-war era captures 3 American soldiers standing tall in their olive drab wool uniforms before the chaos of the trenches defined a generation. these men embody the calm discipline of a military on the brink of modernization. A grim testament to the brutality of the Eastern Front hangs in the cold air of Minsk. These three partisans executed by German forces in 1941 bear a chilling sign declaring their resistance a stark warning intended to crush the spirit of the local population. Long before he became a master of the macabre, a young Tim Burton displays a homemade Halloween costume crafted by his mother. Even in this innocent 1967 snapshot, the creative spark that would later define his cinematic Gothic style is already flickering. Neon. Lights and classic sedans flood the senses in this vibrant capture of Times Square at the height of the fabulous 50s. It is a world of optimism and advertising where the pulse of New York City beats strongest beneath the glow of Broadway. Dwarfing the shipyard workers below the massive propellers of the Titanic stand, ready to push the limits of maritime engineering. This scene from 1908 captures the sheer scale of human ambition before it met its tragic destiny in the icy Atlantic waters. In a silent battle for hearts and minds, soldiers in Taiwan prepared to release a volley of propaganda balloons. These floating messengers carried political leaflets across the strait, a psychological tactic used during the tense standoffs of the Cold War era. Resting quietly in a desert shed, this is a replica of the gadget that changed the world forever. It represents the Trinity device. The first atomic bomb, a complex sphere of wires and explosives that ushered humanity into the terrifying nuclear age. At the Potsdam Conference, a triple handshake binds the leaders of the Allied powers, Churchill, Truman, and Stalin Project Unity. Yet beneath the smiles lies the simmering tension that would soon fracture this alliance and freeze the world into the Cold War. Nature asserts its dominance over the machinery of war as Allied troops watch Mount Vesuvius erupt in 1944. The towering plume of ash over Naples serves as a humbling backdrop, momentarily distracting soldiers from the man-made destruction on the ground. Tension erupts on the streets during Nevruz celebrations as Turkish police should detain a Kurdish man. In 1992, the image captures the raw intensity of ethnic and political strife, a fleeting moment of conflict frozen amidst the chaotic struggle for cultural recognition. Faces pressed against the glass, a family of Turkish immigrants gazes out at their new reality in America, captured in 1965. Their expressions mix anxiety and hope, marking the profound transition from the familiar streets of home to the unknown promise of the West. An eerie silence falls over Istanbul as Turkish soldiers stand guard under the shadow of the 1980 coup d'etat, with tanks rolling through the streets and democracy suspended. The city holds its breath, waiting to see what the new military order will bring. Chaos unfolds in the waters of the Bosporus as Turkish soldiers scramble to rescue an American sailor thrown overboard by anti-imperialist protesters. This dramatic scene highlights the volatile political climate that often greeted foreign military presence during the late 60s. Stripped from its chassis, the massive turret of a Tiger tank sits heavily on the polished soil belonging to the 3rd SS Panzer Division. This steel fortress undergoes urgent repairs, a brief pause in the relentless armored clashes of the Eastern Front. From a grassy hilltop, two young French boys survey the ruins of Saint-Lô. Below them, a convoy of Allied vehicles threads through the devastation, signaling liberation, even as the children look out over the shattered remains of their hometown. Defying the stereotypes of the Prohibition era too, female moonshiners stand in the custody of federal agents. Captured in 1921, these women were part of the vast underground economy that flourished when the country went dry, proving crime knew no gender. Dust kicks up at home plate in this spirited moment of sandlot baseball from around 1918, with the runner sliding hard and the catcher waiting. the umpire's body language screams out, freezing a timeless slice of American pastime history. In the twilight of the 19th century, two women experienced the grandeur of colonial India from atop a majestic elephant. This 1895 photograph captures the intersection of cultures and the exotic allure that drew travelers to the subcontinent during the British Raj. Amidst the mud and misery of Passchendaele, humanity briefly triumphs over hatred. A wounded Canadian and a German soldier share a light united by pain. And tobacco in 1917, proving that individual soldiers often shared more with their enemies than their commanders. Enthusiasm bubbles over in Hungary as U.S. servicewomen jostle for a glimpse of President Clinton en route to peacekeeping duties in Bosnia. These troops find a moment of levity and connection with their commander-in-chief during the uncertainty of Operation Joint Endeavor. Graduation Day takes a dystopian turn at UC Berkeley in 1969. Seniors don gas masks instead of smiles, a silent, suffocating protest against Governor Reagan's use of tear gas and the National Guard to quell student unrest and reclaim People's Park. A young serviceman focuses intently on his rifle at the Aberdeen Proving Grounds. This crisp image from the 1950s captures the rigorous training and technical discipline required to maintain the ordnance that would power the American military machine through the Cold War. Before storming the beaches of Saipan, a U.S. Marine displays his unique hand-painted face, camouflage. The intense stare and jagged patterns reflect the primal, terrifying nature of island-hopping warfare in the Pacific, where every landing was a fight for survival. The flight deck of the USS Enterprise transforms into a makeshift beach in 1945, taking a rare respite from the stress of combat. Sailors soak up the sun, finding a moment of peace on the very steel platform that launched destruction against the enemy. In the muddy hell of Hill 484, Marine Sergeant Jeremiah Purdy, bandaged and bloodied himself, reaches out to a fallen brother. Larry Burroughs' haunting lens captures the raw bond of brotherhood that persists even when the world around them is burning. The sheer power of nature is on display at Lakehurst, where strong winds have tossed the massive airship USS Los Angeles into a vertical handstand. This 1926 spectacle highlights the fragility of these lighter-than-air giants against the unpredictable forces of the weather. Streamers fly and crowds cheer as the nuclear submarine USS Woodrow Wilson slides into the water. This 1963 launch at Mare Island marks another addition to the Silent Service, a sleek, deadly vessel designed to prowl the depths during the height of nuclear tension. Decades before, his name became synonymous with Trader Vidkun Quisling poses for a respectable family portrait. In 1915, it is a chilling look at the mundane origins of a man who would eventually sell out Norway to the Nazi regime. Inside the Kremlin, Vladimir Lenin leans into a recording device capturing the rhetoric of the revolution for posterity. In 1919, technology meets ideology, preserving the voice that would rally the masses and cement the Bolshevik hold on a fracturing Russia. Walter Smith stares down the camera in this 1924 mugshot, charged with breaking and entering. His defiant gaze and disheveled appearance offer a raw, unpolished glimpse into the criminal underbelly of early 20th century Australia, far removed from the roaring 20s glamour. A 2-ton German shell slams into the Prudential building, capturing the exact moment of destruction during the Warsaw Uprising. The towering explosion symbolizes the systematic annihilation of the city as resistance. Fighters fought a desperate, doomed battle against overwhelming firepower. Love persists through the scars of war in this poignant 1915 wedding. A French soldier blinded in the trenches stands beside his bride, a moving testament to the personal sacrifices made by a generation and the women who stood by them. Before the bloodshed of the invasion, Wehrmacht soldiers indulge in a playful snowball fight at a French train yard. This fleeting moment of innocence in 1944 contrasts sharply with the grim reality of the war that would soon consume them all. Looking like college students rather than future icons of cinema, Wes Anderson and Owen Wilson hang out at Sundance in 1993. Their youthful energy hints at the quirky, collaborative genius that would soon disrupt Hollywood with a fresh stylistic voice. Bridging centuries of tradition, Waichiro Hashimoto stands proudly in 1953, wearing ancestral samurai armor. The arquebus and plating passed down for 20 generations serve as a living link to a warrior past that survived into the modern industrial age of Japan. Winston Churchill walks amidst the rubble of Valletta, witnessing the price Malta paid for its resilience in 1943. His presence among the ruins served as a powerful morale boost for the islanders who had endured one of the most severe bombardments of the war. Standing confidently before the Baharistan women parliamentarians of Iran pose in the mid-1970s, their Western attire and political status capture a progressive era of modernization, a sharp contrast to the sweeping cultural changes that would arrive with the revolution just a few years later. Hate pours down in the form of sugar mustard and ketchup on protesters at a Jackson Woolworth's counter. This infuriating 1963 image immortalizes the quiet, stoic dignity of civil rights activists facing the visceral rage of a segregated society. Vertigo-inducing ladders stretch endlessly upward as workers construct the airship USS Macon in 1933. Without modern safety harnesses, these men climbed into the rafters of the Akron hangar, dwarfed by the skeletal frame of the Leviathan they were building. Science fiction becomes reality as the USS Akron, a flying aircraft carrier, launches a biplane from its belly. This 1932 experiment in aerial warfare aimed to extend the Navy's reach, creating a parasite fighter concept that was as ambitious as it was short-lived. The Royal Albert Hall swells with tributes during a salute to the Red Army. In 1944, at this juncture, the Soviet Union was a celebrated ally, and Londoners gathered to honor the sacrifices made on the Eastern Front that were bleeding the Nazi war machine dry. Captured in the sepia tones of 1895, the Leaning Tower of Pisa tilts precariously over a quiet, unpaved square, devoid of the modern tourist crush. The Campanile stands in solitary architectural defiance, a timeless mistake that became a global icon. Radiating the Yo Hamdi, quintessential girl next door, charm Sybil Shepherd captivates the camera. In 1972, this shot from the Heartbreak Kid era captures a Hollywood star on the rise, embodying the shifting beauty standards of a decade moving away from polished glamour to natural allure. The muddy wasteland of Zona Beka claims its due in this harrowing 1917 photograph, clustered near concrete fortifications. The bodies of German soldiers lie where they fell, a graphic reminder of the attrition warfare that turned the Belgian landscape into a graveyard. The horror of combat is etched onto the face of a helicopter crew chief in Larry Burroughs' One Ride with Yankee Papa 13. This 1965 photo essay brought the bloody reality of the Vietnam Air War into American living rooms, stripping away any illusions of glory. Far from the front lines of World War II, a polar bear cub explores the Arctic terrain of Southampton Island, captured by servicemen stationed in the north. This moment of natural beauty offers a stark, peaceful contrast to a world otherwise consumed by fire. Innocence is lost early in the Thousand Days War as red children, child soldiers of the Liberal Army, pose with rifles taken in 1899 Panama. Their small frames, struggling under the weight of war gear, highlight the tragic cost of civil conflict in Colombia. Exhaustion is written in every line of this German soldier's posture as forces retreat from Zhytomyr. In 1943, the turning tide of the war is evident here. The once invincible Wehrmacht is now on the back foot, battered by the relentless Soviet winter offensive. History is made at the border as U.S. President Taft and Mexican President Porfirio Diaz pose in 1909. This first ever meeting between a U.S. and Mexican president signaled a new era of diplomacy, though the Mexican Revolution would soon sweep Diaz from power. Cigar clamped in his teeth, Winston Churchill looks every bit the bulldog as he fires a Thompson submachine gun standing alongside General Eisenhower. In 1944, the Prime Minister tests the tools of invasion, projecting a fierce determination to drive the enemy from Europe.